Balkans are the newest target of Paradox's flavor packs, and with this one, I think they've done a really great job with only some minor hiccups. This DLC adds a lot of content for Austria specifically, and then a little bit of content for Serbia, Montenegro, the Ottomans, and other German and Balkan nations in general. Beyond that though, it also updates the culture system just a little bit, adding some new laws and a whole new concept called law variants. There's a lot of really good stuff here, which makes the game feel a lot more alive, at least for the nations affected by the DLC. That being said, there are a few critical missteps and minor bugs that are throughout the DLC, some of which will easily be fixed with patches, others of which are fundamental design flaws which I don't see being addressed. Nonetheless, don't let that get you down. The good far outweighs the bad with this DLC. I did 3 proper playthroughs on this DLC, one Austria, going down an autocratic and later fascist path, one is the Ottomans, pursuing a Turkish empire, so no republic, but elevating Turkish culture over non-Turkish culture, and the last as Serbia, where I only played for a couple decades and then encountered most of my problems with the DLC. The big piece of content I mostly skipped over was Montenegro. I did play them, but didn't record it, and only played very briefly. It's an interesting addition to the game, but let's be honest here, it's a one-time play it for the gimmick and then drop it type of thing. So I prioritized the experience on nations that are more commonly played and on the broad changes to the game as a whole. I will talk about Montenegro, as they are a source of a few bugs, but not a ton. Let's get into it. Like I mentioned, the first playthrough I did was as Austria. And Austria is sort of the centerpiece, you could say, of this DLC. They have a lot of paths, they have a lot of things they can do, they have a lot of flavor, a lot of journal entries. I really appreciate how many paths they have. For example, you can go fascist, you can go like a federal union of states, you can do a dual monarchy, you can go fully absolutist, you go triple monarchy. There are many paths. And there's a sort of critique slash thing I like there about that, which is how difficult it can be to figure out how to go down a particular path. So the best example I can think of is the triple monarchy, which I find is not necessarily easy to figure out how to unlock it even, but there's kind of a good and bad to that. The good is that when you do uncover a way to get something, it feels like you're discovering something, and that's fun. I like that. The downside is sometimes you just want to know how to get what you want, right? So that's sort of it depends on the player kind of thing, whether that's good or bad, but overall I say it's good to have so many paths. The thing about the journal entries that I'd say I like quite a bit, which can be also bad, is that they're not very urgent. So what I mean by that is that, for example, the Matter of Hungary journal entry, it has a negative modifier on it. It gives some radicalism to discriminated pops, but like, whatever, I don't know, it's not really a big deal. So you want to solve the Matter of Hungary because you want to advance your journals and you want to get it out of your outliner, and it's causing you a slight negative modifier. But at the same time, no rush. It's okay if you can't figure it out, or if you don't want to elevate Hungary into the dual kingdom. The thing about the dual kingdom, of course, that if you pick it, then you can't form Germany until you inevitably annex Hungary. So that's sort of the downside, I guess you could say, to trying to resolve the journal entry quickly. The problem, of course, is that the alternative way to solve it, which is the absolutist path, is to integrate Hungary before making them a personal union and just never making the dual monarchy. If you do that, then you can never actually complete the journal entry, because the way to solve that journal entry without making the dual monarchy is to incorporate Hungary and its states, and then to get acceptance of Hungarians on average above 70. Here's the thing. It says on average above 70, but what it's actually asking for is the baseline cultural acceptance to be over 70. That is unfortunately impossible because the Hungarians share only a heritage trait with the South Germans. They don't share a language or any other trait, and that means that your baseline can never be above 70, because on multiculturalism, you'll accept them at 70. Now, to be clear, this is in fact a bug, and it is in fact not working, because you can see here in this clip, I've got over 95% of Hungarians at 80 to 100 acceptance, so they're tier 5 acceptance, and I can't progress the journal entry. It's just not progressing. It's been like that for decades. I've had multiculturalism since forever. I made a bug report about it, no response from Paradox, so this might be an issue in the release patch as well. But basically, you have to just be stuck with this journal entry forever if you go down the absolutist path, which, okay, whatever, right? That's an example of a bug, and bugs will get fixed. I assume that eventually Paradox will get around to fixing that issue, and that'll be that. But before they do, yes, this is a bug and it kind of sucks. Beyond bugs, there also can be balance issues, and I think one such balance issue is 2 things. First is obstinance. So one of the journal entries that has been somewhat updated by this DLC indirectly is the Springtime of Nations. Previously, Springtime of the Nations more or less just made it so that you had to deal with extra radicals here and there, and you had to decide if you wanted to become a republic or stay a kingdom. Relatively simple. Now, Springtime of the Nations is going to make all of the separatists in your country suddenly very, very upset, and they're going to try and separate very quickly. And it's kind of fun. I like it. It makes for a very chaotic series of years, and it makes you really feel like you're playing as Austria, because they're just getting ravaged by all these separatists. It can be quite dangerous if it catches you at the wrong time, but that being said, you can get through it. It's not like it's impossible. It's not too tough. The part that's unbalanced is obstinance. Obstinance is a new state modifier which happens when any political movement is above 50% activism. Obstinance causes a loss of taxes, which is already killer, by the way. It causes a loss of institution power, so your institutions like education, healthcare, police, etc., they're going to have reduced effectiveness. And it increases decreases the speed of assimilation in that place. So let's say that you were trying to fix your problem with the Polish people in Galicia by assimilating them into German culture. Well, that's not going to work anymore because they're obstinate, they're stubborn. And obstinance makes a lot of sense. Of course, a rebellion should have more impact on your country than just the threat of rebellion or the inevitable rebellion. But this is a bit extreme, especially when playing a country like Austria, where you could have simultaneously separatists in Poland and Bohemia, and then also German nationalists in your core states, who will have the same effect, by the way. Here's the problem with obstinance. It's not the number itself. I'm of course okay with obstinance because it makes a lot of sense. It's that you have, no avenues to stop it. You'd think that police could fix it, but no, police can't do anything. You'd think maybe secret police could do something. They can't do anything either. All you can do is try to reduce the activism of the movement that's causing obstinance to be below 50%. If you do that, the effects completely go away, as if there was none at all. You can also suppress the movement in the hopes that it will reduce the support, and the less support the movement has in a state, the less effect its obstinance will have. Those are your two options. So basically, you can suppress the movement, you can pass secret police, and if you pass regular police and get the power block mandate for coordinated police, then you can actually reduce the effects of obstinance. This to me is crazy. You should have more you can do to try and stop this modifier than just one thing and that's it. Regardless, it's a good system. It should be in the game. I like it. Where we get to an issue that's more of a just total design flaw, in my opinion, is stuff like the German economic miracle, which pops up a bit later in the game. Assuming that you're playing as Austria and you've kind of survived all the rebellions, but you haven't done something like forming Super Germany. You're just playing Austria, let Germany form, and you're chilling. You know what I mean? You're going to have to deal with the fact that the AI is not equipped to deal with the changing circumstances that journals provide. So this journal entry, the Gründerzeit, is about basically trying to grow your economy extremely quickly and in tandem with the other Germans. So the German Empire and Austria are probably going to be the two countries that are on the map that are German at this point. I don't actually remember what the triggering requirements are for this journal, so maybe you could have a weird thing where there's a bunch of independent German city-states who are also trying to grow, but regardless, this is basically a period of time where Austria and Germany work together to raise their GDP by 2.5% per quarter. That's about 10% every year. That's a pretty big ask, okay? It's a lot, but a player can totally do it if they know what they're doing and they're willing to put themselves in debt a bit. So I was playing Austria and I was going ham trying to increase my GDP. But of course, my GDP is smaller than Germany's, and Germany is sitting there stagnating because the AI doesn't know how to make a nice economy, nor does it understand that during this journal entry, you're given an interest rate reduction modifier. So the AI should be willing to take more risks and go into more debt, but alas, their economy is completely stagnating. And because of that, we both failed the journal entry. Now, I made a bug report on this too. Again, no response from Paradox. I think they might not have been in the offices or something. I don't know, but they just didn't seem to respond to any bug reports or any feedback that I gave for this particular DLC. Whatever. This journal is not doable unless you are the player and you form Super Germany, so you control the entire economy and you're not being dragged down by any AI. To be clear, 10% per year GDP growth is already tough for most people. Now try and do it where you only account for half the growth and the AI is the other half. It's not happening, okay? So this is an example of a fundamentally poorly designed journal entry. Not that the idea was bad, not that the concept was bad, but that the AI is not suited to it and the people that made it never tested it at all. So that's unfortunate. It would have been nice if they could have tested this and realized that there's no shot that anyone could succeed this. But, you know, I'm sure Connor will be able to make it happen, But the question is if you could do it while being an Austria that's smaller than Germany. I don't know if you could do it then, but maybe. You never know with a guy like that. I'm sure someone will be able to do it, but the point is that it's unreasonable to expect people to do this. The big critique there, ultimately, beyond just complaining about paradox, of course, is that the AI is not set up to take advantage of journals. They don't see the modifiers and then decide to make more stuff. The German GDP graph should be soaring because they have lower interest rate due to this journal, but instead it stagnates. Like, what the heck is that, right? Beyond that, Austria has a couple of new laws, and one of them is really important, the other one is completely pointless. The first one is manorialism, and this one is huge. Manorialism takes serfdom, removes all the negative modifiers, and then gives you a massive construction bonus. It's completely broken, completely overpowered. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. But I mean, you know, they'll balance it eventually. Give it a couple weeks, maybe. I don't know, maybe a couple days, maybe day one. I don't know. But they'll probably reduce the impact on construction efficiency that these manorialist modifiers have, and then you'll be chill. Especially when you're playing as Austria, because you get this construction efficiency bonus from your subsistence farms. If you go and conquer a state in China, and there's like 500 subsistence farms there, you're going to be building real fast. It's kind of crazy. I will say that, in a way, having this powerful bonus is kind of nice because it balances out how much Austria is held back by all of their, issues with rebellions and stuff. So maybe it's actually balanced in the end, but I'll leave that to people who are more into the balanced side of things. I just want to point out that this exists, and it's kind of really, really strong. The other one is like about bureaucrats, and I don't even know what it changes. I couldn't tell what the difference was because I forget what hereditary bureaucrats does, but this was like a whatever throwaway type thing. I didn't really care for it. Beyond that, Austria gets a couple new companies. They have a prestige engine company. There's a prestige grain company in Hungary that you can use if you integrate Hungary or just use it as Hungary. And there's probably more, but I'm forgetting them. But they're fine. Again, more companies are totally cool. I'm never going to complain about more companies because even if they're bad, it's just another one on the list. And if they're good, then great. I don't think any of them were unbalanced. I wasn't looking at any of them and complaining that they were too good. It was just, okay, they're there. I do like another prestige engine company, though, because previously only Prussia could get it. They got the Scheichau engines, but now as Austria, you can also get some. So that's cool. In terms of how Austria interacts with some of the new mechanics around fervor, it's interesting. Well, I say interesting. It's a lot of missed opportunity, in my opinion. So here's the thing about fervor. For a quick overview on fervor, it's essentially the spread of nationalistic sentiment with that culture. So if you have a culture that has high fervor, they're very rebellious, they're very resistant, they don't assimilate, they're more likely to join cultural movements and stuff like that. So as Austria, you have a lot of minorities. You have Poles, Bohemians, and Italians, Croatians, etc. And those people all want their own countries to some extent. The extent that I'm referring to is their fervor. The higher the fervor, the more they want their own country. Fervor increases based on how discriminated they are, and also based on their literacy is the big one. So here's the problem, is that you of course want more literacy for your country because you want to have, better jobs and better qualifications and more research, stuff like that. So you make schools, and you'd think the easy solution would be, well, send the Germans to school because they're loyal to the country, and then don't send the others to school, right? Well, the thing is that you simply can't make that decision. If I make vast public schools in the hopes of educating my German populace, I'm now going to have to deal with the fact that all of my minorities will get more educated and therefore have more nationalism within them. Now, there's something to be said here for the sort of inevitable rise of nationalism, where it's like, there's no way to stop it, right? Like, it will come. Regardless of that way of looking at things, it's not very fun as a player to feel powerless in general, unless of course it's deserved, but it doesn't feel deserved in this case. There's no way to individually target a culture and try to suppress their fervor. So if a culture is getting a lot of fervor because you're making them literate, you have to just accept that as a side effect of you trying to advance your nation. And again, yes, the inevitability of nationalism, okay, but there really should be ways, I think, to try and stop cultures from rising up, try to crush them in some way. Beyond, of course, the, them rising up and you crushing them militarily. I mean ways to crush their culture, like destroying their language. Maybe policies where, and this is a classic of the Victorian era, policies where the language of the schools they're going to, they forbid the usage of, let's say, Polish, right? I don't know the history super well, but I know this happened at least in France with the Occitan people, is you make it so they can't speak their native language in the schools, and this will contribute to a loss of art, a loss of unity of the people because they lose their language over time, right? And that's obviously cruel, and I consider it to be a horrible thing to do. but we can't act like these things didn't happen and like it's not an important part of how these countries ran themselves, right? There are probably random events. In fact, I believe there is at least one random event that discusses the idea of allowing other languages in schools, but it really should be more of like a button that you can press on a culture and say, this culture not allowed to speak their language. And maybe it causes like an increase in fervor right away, like maybe just plus 10 fervor at that moment, but decreases fervor gain from education institutions. Because remember, there's different ways to gain fervor, right? And one of them is the education institution. So how about we just make it so that you can reduce that particular influence and the other ones can stay? I don't know. I'm thinking of random ideas, but the point is that discrimination absolutely happened in life, in history. So we should reflect that in some way. It's an important part of the strategies these countries use to try and avoid total collapse. Regardless, right now, your only option with fervor is to accept that it will go up or to hamper your own nation and then to fight down the rebels. That's what you can do. Oh well, not a huge deal. I guess the other option is to pass multiculturalism, which is more of a late game option, but yes, that works too. So beyond that stuff, since the fervor mechanic is kind of general, it's not just an Austrian thing, Austrian content is very nice. I very much so enjoyed it. I liked the companies, I liked the journals, I didn't encounter any bugs. I mentioned the one earlier about if you incorporate Hungary as part of the autocratic path, then you can't actually solve the matter of Hungary journal entry, and that's unfortunate. But it's a pretty minor bug. I assume they'll get patched, and yeah, not bad. I think Austria is great. We're gonna move on now to the Ottomans. The Ottomans are sort of the other side, I guess you could say, of this issue. Where the Ottomans have very little journal entries, they actually interact with the fervor mechanics a little more closely. So there's this law, which Austria also has, by the way, called subjecthood. I didn't bring it up with Austria because it's less important for Austria. Every pop in Austria, for the most part, shares a heritage, so they're all European. But in the Ottoman Empire, you have Europeans, you have Middle Easterners, you have Africans, you have a lot of different people that live there. So, with that in mind, subjecthood becomes more important. Subjecthood gives plus 30 acceptance to all pops that are in their homelands. So that means that if they're just living where they're supposed to be, they have a lot of acceptance. I say a lot. 30 plus the other stuff like sharing a heritage and sharing a language, stuff like that, is going to put them most of the time up to 50. So around 50 or so, they're considered to be the tier 3 of tolerance, I think. Maybe it's tier 2. I think it's tier 3. But the point is that they're a high enough tolerance that they can work in bureaucracies and work in the military. And that's a very important difference between national supremacy Ottomans from previous patches. On national supremacy, the Ottomans from before would have a lot of trouble working with the minorities in their country because they were so discriminated they couldn't even build tax collecting places in there. So that really sucked. Now with the Ottomans, you're faced with this important decision. It's, do you want to focus on the Turkishness of the empire or the Ottomanness, I guess you could say, of the empire? That Ottomanness is represented through the Rumelian cultural trait, which is granted to some of the cultures in the empire, and it indicates like a participation in the diverse metropolitan, or rather cosmopolitan, sort of culture of the Ottoman Empire. It's a cool thing. You don't lose that cultural trait unless the Ottoman Empire itself completely collapses, so you have to like lose control of all the Balkans and stuff, then you'll lose that trait. But otherwise, yeah, you just keep it, and even if you choose to go to national supremacy or race segregation later, you just sort of get to keep that around, and it's cool. The reason why you have to pick between whether or not you want to be more Turkish or more Ottoman is because inevitably, the Turkish supremacists will start getting support, and they'll want you to be focusing on Turkishness, and then the separatists of the country, who will have risen up presumably by this time many times at you, they're also going to want to stay on subjecthood or go to multiculturalism. So it's kind of like you have to make your decision at some point, because if you don't, then you'll just kind of already have made your decision to stay Ottoman, I guess. There's one journal entry added to the Ottoman Empire, and that is the Great Eastern Crisis. This is one where essentially all of your subjects will gain a bunch of liberty desire, and you're going to get a bunch of separatist movements happening all at once. And your goal is to prevent the separatists from succeeding and try to maintain the empire. And the thing is that it's actually very easy to avoid this journal entry altogether. In order to avoid it, you have to complete Tanzimat and then just never have a separatist movement get above 50%. Now, in my particular playthrough, I ended up actually colonizing much of East Africa, and when I did that, there was at one point an Oromo separatist movement, and it happened just because, it's very hard to avoid having a ton of radicals in places like that, where they're like the lowest possible tolerance, and they all hate you, and you recently conquered them and stuff like that. In that case, I had like one separatist movement down in Ethiopia, and then because of that, my whole nation was on the verge of collapse, apparently. So this journal entry kind of assumes that you will have gone through it in the early game. In the case of my game, I had never gone through it in the early game, and then it triggered way later in the game by the time I had already like integrated most of my subjects and I had already like kind of dealt with all the racial issues of my country. So it was quite an awkward moment when suddenly I'm apparently collapsing, but everything was totally fine. Regardless, that journal entry is pretty mid, nothing special about it, but it's there to represent the collapse of the empire, and it's more there to give flavor for the Serbians and stuff, who you can also play, who we'll talk about in the next, section. Interestingly enough, the Ottoman Empire doesn't get a lot of flavor because of the lack of, journal entries, but they do get a lot of flavor in the sense that the new mechanics that have been introduced into the game make playing them much more interesting. The decision between subjecthood and Turkishness, like I mentioned already, is really significant and it is really fun, especially because subjecthood reduces the rate at which you assimilate. So if your plan is to deal with the minorities by assimilating them, then you really don't want to stick on subjecthood. It's not a good idea, especially because that national assimilation decree, which we'll talk about now, also increases radicalism among discriminated people when you use it. So that decree, we should talk about that. Now, you can assimilate pops in homeland states. And I'll say this, tolerance is still very much so the better way to go in like almost every case, because once you pass multiculturalism, you no longer even have to worry about your cultural makeup, just everyone is tolerated. That's wonderful. But there is a nice usage for this, and that's roleplay. As the Ottoman Empire, I chose to spend a lot of time assimilating off in the east, the Kurds and the Armenians, into my Turkish culture. That way I could have like my Turkish cultural borders kind of where they more or less are in real life. And that was really, really cool to see and to do. I really enjoyed it. The problem is that in this particular case, the Kurds were mostly already at max level tolerance because Kurds share a heritage with the Turks, they share a religion, and they have the Rumelian trait. At least I think they do. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was just that the religion plus the cultural traditions just added up to at least 80. But the point is that you don't really need to bother with trying to assimilate Kurds because you already tolerate them. But you do it for the roleplay, I guess, right? Now, when it came to the Armenians, that was more useful because they're Christian and they're, European instead of being Middle Eastern. So that was a good one to do. But here's the problem, I guess you could say, with this decree. The more fervor a culture has, the more resistant it is to assimilation. The more discriminated a culture is, the more resistant it is to assimilation. So the cultures you want to assimilate, that would be like the Greeks, the Armenians, the various other minority cultures that hate you. Those ones are very difficult to assimilate and are very slow. The cultures that you can quickly assimilate are the ones that already like you, so you have no reason to assimilate them. Here's a game mechanics. Assimilating those Kurds did absolutely nothing for me, except insofar as the Turkish culture has an obsession with coffee. So I'm increasing my coffee consumption by doing that. That's the only reason why you want to do it, is if you have an obsession on your culture. That means that it's kind of weirdly pointless to assimilate, but I will say that's completely okay with me because it's fun to simulate that idea. The problem I have is that your only option is the assimilation or the tolerance. There's no third option, and I think you know where I'm going with this. The Ottoman Empire historically has quite a bit of history with war crimes and doing terrible things. And I want to be clear that I don't like those things, I'm not happy about those things, but these are things that occurred in history, so they probably should be represented in some way. As the Ottomans, I have to either tolerate the Armenians or I have to assimilate them. I can't do anything else, which historically did happen to them. The Armenians famously were forced onto death marches, they were outright killed, there were a lot of horrible things that happened to them, okay? And in game, we already have the Trail of Tears in America. So clearly, the devs are not above representing these death marches and these terrible things. But for some reason in this DLC, we have to act like the Balkans didn't have horrible war crimes. There is an event in the game which talks about war crimes that happens after you put down a rebellion. And it's a joke. It's a total joke. It makes you take on infamy in return for one of four things. You either just take infamy, so it's like 30, I think, infamy flats. You take like 15 infamy and you fire a general, so basically you scapegoat a general into being the guy that caused the issues. You take 10 infamy and you blame it on an ally, so, someone who has relationship with you, you just lose relations and gain 10 infamy. Or, and this is the part that really upsets me, you take 50 infamy and you get a modifier that reduces activism on all of your political movements. Now, first of all, that's never worth taking, but that's fine. It's not about balance here. It's about the implications. So you're telling me that war crimes have occurred, okay? But not a single pop has died, or been assimilated, or been converted, or any any destruction, what do you call it, devastation in any part of the country. Nothing has happened at all. And I'm taking 50 infamy. Look, if I'm playing Austria and we put down the Poles in a rebellion and I'm taking 50 infamy, I want there to at the very least, be some devastation, okay? Or maybe a modifier that adds mortality to that particular culture. But we're talking about absolutely nothing. Now, what I think should happen is that there should be like an expulsion. It should be all of the Poles have to leave for 50 infamy. Because 50 infamy, to never have to deal with a Polish uprising again, you know, quite the trade-off. But it's one that you could see me maybe taking, especially because of the historical precedent, not precedent, but the impact, you could say. I would find that to be a powerful decision to make. As of right now, it's a bit of a joke. I think Paradox kind of wanted to head off the "there's no war crimes in the Balkan DLC, what is this" kind of critique. And they did it by actually making it worse, by basically saying that they know that war crimes happened in this era and in this period and in this place, okay? But they refuse to let the game have it. They won't let the game represent these things. That to me is really stupid. It's really, really stupid. You either should completely lampshade it and just not even have war crimes, or if you're gonna have them, actually put them in the game as a consequence. It cannot be the case that as the Ottoman Empire, you just do nothing to the Armenians beyond tolerate or assimilate them. There should be another option. It should be the autocratic option of just eradicating people. Not that I like that. Again, I don't want that to be the case. And in the game balance, it makes sense why you wouldn't want to, because they're workers, they're labor. You want to keep your labor around. You want pops, right? So you don't want to do these things, but it's a trade-off, right? It costs you infamy, but it gets rid of these rebellious people, and now you have a more homogenous country. That's like a positive in a way, although one which is easily circumvented by just having secret police. Again, it's not about balance. It's not about balance. It's about just the insult to history. Regardless, in terms of the game, it's not a big deal. It's not really that big of a deal. It's just kind of frustrating, I guess you could say. Anyway, another thing I'll talk about when it comes to the Ottoman playthrough is subjects. So, Liberty Desire hasn't been reworked entirely, but there's been a new way to increase or decrease it, and that's through army size. So now, when you have a puppet, you have to have 10 times the army power projection that they have, or else they start gaining massive Liberty Desire. And personally, I really enjoy this change, because it means that if you're a subject, you have ways to increase your Liberty Desire much more consistently, and that is, of course, to just build up an army. And as a ruler over subjects, you can significantly decrease the Liberty Desire on your subjects by simply increasing your army size. So it essentially allows you to have a little more influence over whether or not your subjects will be loyal, and it creates a reason to hold a massive military. Because before, once you subjugated someone, what you do is you put like 100 wheat farms in them so you control their economy, and now they're loyal to you forever. It should not be like that. You know, it should be more like if they have the opportunity to break free because your army is weak, they should try to break free. In terms of bugs for the Ottoman Empire, nothing too crazy. The big thing is Montenegro, and this isn't necessarily a bug, but there is a bug with it. It's that when Montenegro raids you, it just doesn't really matter like at all. I don't know what to say about it. When Montenegro raids you, they're going to add a negative state modifier to Bosnia specifically. It's always Bosnia. I don't know why it's never anywhere else, but it goes to Bosnia, and it just gives tax collection issues. Here's where the bug is with it. Even after you eradicate Montenegro, whether by subjugating them or by conquering them, you still get the modifier in Bosnia. So that particular state of Bosnia will be forever marred with Montenegrin raiders, even decades after the Montenegrins have been conquered. That's the kind of bug that'll probably get patched out pretty fast, though. I'm not too worried about that one. The problem I have with Montenegro's interaction with Turkey is that they just don't really do anything. Like, they just sit there, and if you let them raid you, that's fine. You can spend infamy, a very valuable resource, on stopping them from raiding you, but like, why would you ever do that? Infamy is far more valuable than getting minus, let's say, 60% tax collection in one state that you don't really care about. Basically, the point is that I felt like Montenegro was going to be something a little bit more than what it was, but actually it was like nothing, so who cares, I guess. Beyond that, though, the Ottomans are a great experience in this patch. You might think that it's very difficult to play them now because of all this new cultural fervor stuff, but in reality, if you stack Secret Police and you stack the Coordinated Police mandate in your power block, you can basically completely nullify all the issues because you'll have minus 50 activism across all of them. So it's pretty good. I think that if you don't do that though, you're gonna have a real tough time. There's gonna be a lot of uprisings and stuff, and your people will always be rebellious. But yeah, I had a fun time playing as the Ottomans. I loved the new flavor for them in terms of the way that fervor interacts with them. It's nice. I just wish we could target cultures and do more, alternative methods. But speaking of that stuff, we probably gotta talk about Serbia now. Now, Serbia is by far the sort of smallest of the flavor nations I played when it came to this DLC. Again, there's Montenegro, which I didn't really get around to playing very much, but with Serbia, you have stuff to do with the Ottoman collapse, where when the Ottomans get that previous journal entry I mentioned in their section about the Great Eastern Collapse, you get a bunch of Libya desire and opportunity to break free. The nice thing is that although Serbia has very few journal entries, besides the Obranović and Karađorđević family journal entry, which is kind of meh, the game's mechanics make Serbia much more interesting to play. Now as Serbia, you focus on your own fervor, so you're trying to increase your literacy, you're trying to do things to get your fervor up, so that you can have a rebellion against the Ottomans and gain land. I found that playing as Serbia was pretty easy because you get Russia to support your independence, you easily get your independence, then you wait for the Great Eastern Collapse and you watch as the Ottomans have Serbian separatists, then you join those separatists and you just hold the defensive line against the Ottomans, which is quite easy. So with that, Serbia is quite interesting to play. Here's the problem though, and it's just like I mentioned before, we can't do anything besides tolerate or assimilate the Turks, and the Turks cause a lot of problems for Serbia. So in my playthrough, Russia invaded at one point the Ottomans and liberated Bulgaria, and I of course immediately annexed Bulgaria because I saw the opportunity to, and I was in a power block with Russia where they had the defensive pact one, where they can't attack each other or join against each other. So I could invade Bulgaria and no one would defend them. I conquered Bulgaria, and Bulgaria, even today, although significantly more in this period, has Turkish minorities. And these Turkish minorities rose up against me so often that I could not integrate Bulgaria. It takes 5 years to integrate them as Serbia, and they rose up every 3 or 4 years. So every time they rise up, they reset the integration progress, and I have to just accept that. Here's the thing. I could wait for multiculturalism, that's fair, okay, but that would take a long time, and it's unreasonable given that I only have one small minority, which is the Turks in Bulgaria. The other option is to assimilate the Turks, but the problem is that because I don't have incorporation on that state, my public schools aren't working, so the assimilation is really slow, and the Turks there are really discriminated, so much so they actually can't be assimilated because they're considered tier 1 discrimination, and you can't assimilate below tier 2. So there's just these people here who I cannot do anything, because remember, it's not their homeland, so they don't get the homeland bonus, they're just sitting there on 1 discrimination. And when I win the rebellions against them, I get the war crime event, and I can't do anything to get rid of these Turks. So you know what happens is they get defeated in the rebellion, so they lose their activism, they lose some fervor. Then a couple years later, they're back again, and I have to defeat them again. And then they're back again, and I gotta defeat them again. It just keeps happening, and this whole time it's happening so often that I can't integrate Bulgaria. It's stupid. In history, I can tell you this, okay? If this people rebelled 3 times against the government, they'd be tried as treasonous, traitors, and then they would be summarily executed probably, or expelled to the Ottoman Empire, or a population swap would happen or something. The point is that it feels nonsensical watching these Turkish uprisings happen over and over again and doing nothing about it whatsoever. It's, no good. The even bigger issue, of course, well, not even bigger, but a similar issue, is of course the obstinance. So when these rebellions have not even fired, they're just getting ready to fire, if they get above 50% activism, which they will, they're going to put obstinance in my states, and the obstinance cuts my taxes, it cuts my institutions, it cuts my assimilation, it ruins everything. And this obstinance is also going to happen in my capital states, where I have Turkish minorities as well, because Serbia, Western and Eastern, has some Turkish minorities if you take that part of it that the Ottomans ruled. So that's really, really awful. I'm just sitting here dealing with these horrible people who a 10% minority of Turks in Belgrade is going to cause me to lose 30% of my taxes. And it's what the hell, man? I can't do anything about it. It's terrible. It's awful. Regardless, that doesn't denigrate Serbia's experience. I mean, Serbia as a nation to play is lots of fun. I enjoy playing them. They have some cool companies. They have good stuff going on. I don't know. It's a good experience. It's fun. I joined the Russian market in my game and just lived off the Russian market, and that was all fine. But I'm very frustrated by these constant Turkish uprisings. So what can I do about that? Nothing. I wish I could do something about it. The other final sort of critique I'll have for Serbia here is that you don't really get a lot of control over your fervor aside from some random events and your literacy. So my strategy was to put down literacy decrees across all of my Serbian majority states and just hope that that would increase it. And then I was hoping for random events. The thing is that your fervor has an equilibrium value. So you might get an event that gives you plus 10 fervor, let's say. It'll just equilibrium back down to wherever it's supposed to be. So the event doesn't really matter very much. And to complete the journal entry, I have to get up to 75. So that's going to take a very long time because I'm going to have to increase my literacy a ton and get more schooling. But in order to get school, I have to get the human rights so I can get the primary school compulsory law or whatever. And that's going to take forever. So I'm just sitting here watching the fervor kind of stagnate when I want to increase it, but I can take no actions to do it. So that sucks. Again, you're robbing the player of the agency, I guess you could say, which is more to do with regards to fervor. Anyway, before we wrap up on this, I want to say that I've been sort of levying a lot of critiques here, but the funny thing is that I actually really like the DLC. I really like the Austrian journal entries. I really like the Ottoman stuff. I liked playing all these games. I just find that there's things that I wish were better. I tend to focus on the negative. It's unfortunate, but it is how I examine these DLCs. I look for what's wrong and I think of how it could be better. But I had fun playing though. Like the whole time I was enjoying myself, even if there was the occasional frustration. It's a natural thing that Victoria 3 does where you feel a bit frustrated here and there. It's hard to avoid in this game. But like 95% of the time I was happy, and then just 5% of the time I was wishing I could do something. Especially this assimilation decree. As the Ottomans, watching Baghdad become majority Turkish was great. I even assimilated Baku into Turkish culture by doing migration and assimilation. If you combine a migration decree and an assimilation decree, you can basically just take over states. Now, I wish there was a way to maybe add your homeland to it eventually. Wouldn't that be cool if you could add homelands to the map? But that's getting too far. That's okay. I don't need that. That would be too much maybe. Regardless, there's a couple of smaller changes I want to talk about before we wrap up here, and then we'll, give the rating and call it the review. I want to commend Paradox on adding this law variant system, because law variants open up a lot of flavor for mods and for future DLCs. The thing I wish that we could see is the ability to unlock these law variants for other countries. So for example, Austria gets manorialism. It'd be cool if there were a way to get manorialism on other countries. But the fact that you can't isn't a huge deal. It just would be cool to do it. I was thinking of maybe some kind of system where if you get a journal entry that says like learning the ways of manorialism, I don't know, whatever, and it has some kind of steep requirements, like you have to go back to serfdom for 10 years. That alone is like really bad, by the way. Serfdom sucks. But let's say you did that, then you could unlock manorialism and then you could use that system. Again, no idea if that'd be balanced or not. Just the point is that it'd be nice if these law variants weren't truly exclusive to the countries, but I'll live with it. It's okay. I love the idea. It's very nice. The next thing I'm very happy to see is the change to a interest group's ideology being possible now through just one journal entry. The technocracy journal entry, called the New Order, is unlocked whenever you pass technocracy. And when you do that, you have a couple laws you have to pass, like appointed bureaucrats and stuff like that, interventionism, etc. When you pull it off, and then you maintain a technocracy-oriented government for a couple years, you're able to get an event which lets you change the ideology on your intelligentsia to be technocratic. And I love this. I have said for I don't know how long, probably since the game came out, that interest group ideologies should be somewhat dynamic. Like, I don't know how, I don't have the answer right off the top of my head, but some way to change these ideologies would be wonderful besides the leader. The leader's one thing, but I think of the interest groups as representations of the values of your society to some extent. And the fact that they are unchanging is kind of weird considering the era that we're in of just completely changing values in society, right? With this journal entry, we have unlocked the capability to change ideologies on a interest group at least one time. And I love this philosophy and I want to see it done more often. So Paradox, if you're listening, I think this is really good. Even if this particular change is maybe overpowered, like getting command economy and technocracy by default on intelligentsia is really good, I don't care. I think it's an amazing idea. I want to see more of it, where the laws that you pass start to trickle down to your people. And of course, the people themselves maybe could trickle up to your laws, but they kind of want to do that, I guess. Regardless, I like it. That's the point. The other thing, there's two more things I want to talk about before we wrap it up, is that corporate state is no longer a corporatocracy. They learned that those two things are different. Corporate state now, unfortunately, is quite useless because it used to give a company slot, and that made it overpowered. Now it's kind of just like useless, but at least it's not like a miscarriage of history by making corporate states company oriented. They're not corporatocracies, they're corporate states. I want more things to change about corporate states so it can feel like it kind of stands on its own legs. Right now it's council republic but petite bourgeoisie instead of trade union, and like, okay, I guess, but you know, whatever, it is what it is. I guess it gives you a cool flag on some of the nations, but yeah, I'd like to see that maybe there's some kind of unique mechanic with corporate state where it lets you decide the wages for your businesses as the state, maybe, because that's kind of more in line with what corporatism was. Regardless, cool, glad to see it. There's one more thing, and that's the ruler in parliament's journal entry. If you're a monarchy and you passed some kind of elections, then you'll have this journal entry that starts to fire where you kind of change towards this like constitutional monarchy. And I like it because, again, it represents this change in your society, right? It doesn't change any ideologies, and that's fine, but I like that it's there because it indicates that your law changes are impacting the perception of the people on your government and on your state. So good to see. I want to see more of that. Anyway, I've already talked pretty largely at extent of what stuff I wish was here, but I'll reiterate very quickly. More ways to control fervor beyond literacy, and that's basically it. More ways to target cultures in order to reduce their fervor, to get rid of them, or to just target them in some way, hurt them, you know? If you want to rule over a people, I want a way to autocratically put them down. And I guess beyond that, like maybe more reasons to assimilate. Like the difference between any given culture, if it's at tolerance level 5 and the primary culture is nil, except if there's obsessions. So I'd like that to be changed. But beyond that, I mean, yeah, cool. This DLC, to me, significantly improves the game using mechanics as opposed to just journal entries. It does have journal entries, but it improves the game a lot. I'm very happy with it. When you compare it to France's journal entries from Voice of the People, it's just night and day. I think it's an excellent DLC, and although it's definitely no Charters of Commerce, remember, it's a flavor pack, not a mechanics pack. And given that it's a flavor pack, given what it's trying to accomplish and how well it does it, I'm going to give it like an 8.5 out of 10. I was thinking of giving it a 9, but it feels like that's a little too much credit. I'm going to give it 8.5 because there are some bugs, and I think the inability to have more agency about fervor and about discrimination is kind of a problem. It could have been 10 out of 10 if we were able to do more to impact fervor and if we were able to do more to target cultures that are being rebellious. The war crime events is a slap in the face, that's a meme, that's a joke. Give me some real war crimes if you're going to put them in the game at all. And beyond that, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you consider perhaps subscribing, and thank you for your time.